If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. The midterm elections are right around the corner, and already the white hype machine is preparing itself to kick into high gear. Actually, it's a high-pressure machine, one that's intended to crush you into submission. The white media will be selling all kinds of hysteria over the course of the next 8 to 9 months, but the main snake oil that they're going to be selling is inevitability. When a system tells you something is inevitable, what they're saying is resistance is futile. That's the entire point. They're telling you, what are you doing? Thinking to yourself, you're not going to go along. You got to go along. You got to do what we say. Because even if you don't, it doesn't matter. Your resistance doesn't matter. So you might as well comply. See, that's what they always say. They don't say, well, your resistance doesn't matter, so you can do whatever you want to do. It's like, no. Your resistance doesn't matter, so you might as well stop resisting. That's the entire point of convincing people that something is inevitable. The entire reason that they're going to be doing it is to convince black people in particular that what happened last year with the presidential election was just a blip on the radar, and certainly won't happen again. There's a blue wave coming, they say, and it's going to sweep the GOP out of at least one House of Congress, possibly two. Yeah, the exact same way it did during Trump's first term. So the hell what? This is the usual ebb and flow, seesaw back and forth of the Beltway machine. This is not something that basically means that black folks are supposed to sit on their hands and, oh, see, there's inevitability. No, this is just white power doing business as normal. But we're not in this for one election cycle. What we are doing, that's the new normal. You cannot come to foundational black American voters empty-handed. That's the point that's being made. And if the only thing that you're coming to black voters with is that you're not the orange man, then that means you haven't come to us with anything at all. This is not about defeating some white right-wing cult of personality. This is about effecting a paradigm shift in American politics, one that is long overdue. Now, as we go into 2026, expect to see the exact same scumbags and DNC shills and tools and plants online. You know, the ones who have been laying low and been quiet for about the last year or so. Expect to see these clowns come out of hibernation, and they're going to begin the steady drumbeat of, black folks, it's too dangerous for y'all to be staying at home. Just vote for whoever the Democrats put in front of you and don't make any demands. All that matters is that Trump has to be put out. Look what he did to the Kennedy Center. Oh yes, because John Kennedy was black America's greatest friend, don't you know? And speaking of friends, don't you dare let anybody come up to you with this crap about, well, you gonna need political allies if you gonna get anything done. That's the exact same crap that they told the baby boomers, the civil rights generation, told them, well, you gotta go along with allies. Except the problem was the allies, quote unquote, they were the only ones who got anything. We didn't. It's time to start being politically mature. We are a group. Groups don't have friends. Groups have interests. But before you can press your demands, you have to understand what your interests actually are. Do you? Or do you sit back and let somebody from the white media or some scum-sucking civil rights retread try to dictate it to you because it's easier than figuring it out for yourself? See, our problem is we know full well exactly what our interests are. We know exactly what it is that we need. But our problem happens to be that we're always waiting for permission to step forward and demand what we should have. We're waiting for it to be popular. That's our issue. This country is founded on anti-black racism, and all of these other groups have participated in it. All of them have been eating good off of our deprivation, and they've also been profiting from it. So that being the case, when we come along and start saying it's time to change things, they're looking and going, oh, no. White supremacy gave us a guaranteed spot under white supremacy. So that being the case, we're not about to go ahead and start working for a living and jeopardize that. No. We're going to fight to maintain that status quo. Because sure, white power didn't make these model minorities and these other folks who identify as white on their driver's licenses into honorary members of the oppressor class. But what it did do was it assigned them a position higher than black people. And for a lot of them, that was good enough. Well, black folks are going to have to decide, is that good enough for us? See, this is what's going on with all of these ICE raids. You got black folks who are finally discovering their spine. This is precisely the kind of thing that would not have happened if Kamala the Tether Harris had become president. Do you think we'd be having this kind of moment of reckoning? Of course not. Black folks are going to have to start getting comfortable with being unpopular because power is not about popularity. It's about getting yours. And when you have a situation where you have a racial zero-sum game, which is exactly what America is, a zero-sum game where we're supposed to get zero and everybody else gets some, you better realize that you're sitting at a poker table where everybody else is in league against you. You think that you're competing against 6 individual players individually? No. It's all of them in league against you. So when are you going to get tired of being a mark? Power is defined as the ability to define yourself and to define your relationship to those around you in such a way that your definition becomes theirs. That which they cannot defeat, they have no choice but to accept. Nowhere in that definition, though, does it say that other people would like it. It simply says that your definition becomes theirs. Again, for the slow folks, it doesn't mean that you have no choice but to like it. As Dr. Claude Anderson said, it's not about loving everybody. It's about what you say being the way it is. This is why delineation angers all these other people. We, foundational Black Americans, are defining ourselves, and we're doing it in such a way that our definition becomes theirs. See, everybody else is used to power being exercised against us exclusively. That's reassuring to them. When they see us being downtrodden, when they see us being mistreated with impunity, they get a warm fuzzy out of that. They love that. It's just a reminder to them that the status quo is still in place and it ain't changing. It's reassuring to them. Our suffering is reassuring. But when we start taking power in our own hands and doing something merely as basic as saying this is who we are, and we also show that we have the ability to gatekeep that definition, and by doing so, we make it where whether they like it or not, our definition becomes theirs because it has to. They don't have the ability to change it. They can't bums rush the door. And that's a new feeling for them, that they don't have the ability for white power to say, oh, we're just going to hand this to you. Oh, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the definition, and there's nothing that those pesky FBAs can do about it. They're not used to that. When you have something that other people want, and they can't get it because you're denying it to them, that is a form of power. Obviously, it doesn't make you all powerful. It's simply in one regard, but it does show that other people don't have the power to overwhelm you, at least not on that particular thing. And people have also been concerned because when the rest of the world thinks of Black America, we're the ones they think about. What we're doing has global implications. So many other people have been able to ride on the coattails of our history, and then those same individuals claim that there's no racism in America. Slavery was a long time ago. Well, Black Americans make a lot of excuses for what are their own failures. They carry all the white power's lines while telling everybody that they are us. And then everyone else around the world lumps them in with us and says, well, the Black Americans are saying it's not a problem, so it must not be. There's a lot of people who stand to lose a lot if they cannot cosplay as us. They've had a free ride at our expense because we allowed a fake definition, a fake identity to be saddled on our backs. And now we're getting it off of our backs. We're exercising power over how we identify ourselves and how others are to identify us. As a result, we're defining the space we're in. See, we're not supposed to have the ability to do that. To go from being purely reactive to, at least in this instance, proactive, and in a way that the white media cannot conjure any magic against, they can't do any sort of switcheroo on this one. But that isn't to say that they're not going to try. Expect to see Barack Obama, of course, coming out of hiding next year. That white media money that he and Michelle have been getting, well, is not going to keep rolling in forever, not unless he continues to earn it. A bootlick is still a slave, so Barack will need to demonstrate to white power that he still has the ability to corral us, to con, well, some of us. His finger wagging and lecturing that he did last year was disastrous. Sure, it made some white leftists giggle. They were delighted by it. But they weren't the ones who decide whether those battleground states went red or blue. Black voters are the ones who make that call. And Barack and Michelle's national tour of disrespect last year was a key factor in black voters, especially the under 50 crowd, staying home. And Kamala Harris will be even more useless than usual next year. Not only does she lack the ability to get herself elected to any national office, she can't even convince people to support anyone that she likes either. But the white media will still put her and the Obamas on and claim through their crooked teeth that these guys enjoy high popularity with black voters. Yeah, that's why black voters in 2016 defied Barack Obama when he said, "You've got to secure my legacy. I'll consider it a personal insult if the black vote doesn't turn out." Well, they didn't turn out. They could care less what Barack Obama thought. They sealed his legacy by handing the keys of the White House over to the very guy who said that he wasn't even an American, his worst enemy. And then did the exact same thing last year. And speaking of last year, Kamala Harris was the very person who black voters said, nah, we ain't going for that. Same way that black voters turned their backs on her in 2019 when she made her own disastrous presidential run. She lost all the battleground states last year, even though black voters were the ones who delivered those same battleground states to Biden in 2020. Yeah, but that only happened because black voters love Kamala Harris so much, right? Oppressors, especially the ones from Europe, have always used buffer groups to confuse and undermine the oppressed. And if a buffer group didn't exist in the places they wanted to dominate, then they would create one, usually by bringing them in from abroad, or in the cases of places like Northern Ireland, they would have children by the native women, and it would be those children who would have split loyalties, and they would be the buffer group, or in places like the US and South Africa, they would do all of the above. Barack and his beard Michelle were just so sure that they were going to be the head Negroes in charge for life, that they would be leading us around by the nose for all eternity. And they're the most surprised that that didn't happen. He thought that he was going to be immortalized as political royalty and that at some point, hell, they could do whatever the world they wanted to. Why not make Michelle Obama president? After all, if black voters were dumb enough to vote for Obama twice in a row when the man was insulting us to our faces, not just saying he wasn't going to do anything, but telling us to our faces that we need to pull our pants up and all this stereotypical stuff, if he could finger wag and insult us and still get the lion's share of the black vote twice in a row, well, hell, anything's possible. That's what they thought. But the one thing they didn't think was possible was black folks waking up. They figured, oh, no. That's the only thing that's impossible. Barack and Michelle are still doing their grift for multi-billion-dollar corporations. It's a dirty dollar, but it still spins. Well, our next move has got to be to untether ourselves from all of these bootlicks. There has to be a litmus test for getting our vote. And people finally coming to terms with the political reality of facing up to our lineage, that must be the foundation of it. Now expect those people to try to use weasel words to get around it, or to claim that our lineage is something other than what we've said. Expect that to happen. That's going to be their desperation move. But the rubber is not going to meet the road unless and until black people start to build where they are. And by build, the first thing you need to be building is groups of like-minded people who come together regularly. A lot of black folks desperately want to avoid having to do that because when you get groups of people together and begin discussing things, that introduces the serious threat that you might actually have to do it. And yet, if you look at everything from abolition to the civil rights movement, that's the only thing that has ever worked. So why do you have so many black people who understand that reality and at the same time do everything that they can to avoid it? It's like a fat person who claims they want to lose weight. That's not true at all. They don't want to lose weight because if they did, they'd already be doing it. They just want to talk about losing weight, but still stuff their faces. Well, for many of them, having a fitness buddy usually does the trick. Because when they tell somebody else about their alleged fitness goal, that becomes a real dilemma for them. Because now they have someone who can hold them accountable if they don't do it. And that's the reason why most people who talk about losing weight don't tell it to other people they know. Because they're fully aware that they're only a little bit serious about it and they don't really want someone to hold them accountable for what they're saying. And sadly, this same bad practice goes for black politics too. Black people avoid local associations precisely because too many black people don't want to be accountable. Too many black people get a little bit nervous about saying, hey, here are the rules and regulations that we're going to need to abide by. That's because you got too many black people who just want to do their own thing. And because too many of us have sat silent with what's gone on, we've allowed the situation to get to this point. This same lack of character also applies to the political sellouts who have slithered amongst us. We avoid accountability from one another, and as a result, we have trash who come up to us and tell us they're not accountable to us either, even though we put them into office. And worst of all, we'll have other people from our own community, people in our midst, who will give us all kinds of lies, obfuscations, and deflections to justify why we shouldn't be holding these guys accountable. It becomes like a cancer. It metastasizes, spreads, and kills the body politic. I made a video about 15 years ago called We're All Detroiters Now, and most of that video had to do with how Detroit didn't hold its black political leadership accountable when they started gaining political offices in the 1970s. Because all these political prostitutes were only out for themselves. You can't insist on people being competent or dedicated or even honest if you're not willing to insist on them being accountable too. Lawrence O'Donnell admitted only once that you have to show these politicians that you're capable of not voting for them, especially if you want them to take you seriously. Now, he's right, that's a good move, but it's only a first step. Yes, you have to show them that you're capable of not voting for them, but at some point, you've got to go to the next logical step, and that is to show that you can make these guys irrelevant, that you can remove them from the board altogether and put your own pieces in there. The goal is not to try to force a vicious anti-black system to capitulate and present candidates who are acceptable to us. The goal is to bypass the bastards altogether and put people in place who we selected. But even that won't be sufficient long-term if the people we put in place know that you can't or won't hold them accountable. Sooner or later, the rot will set in if you let it. The power is supposed to be in your hands. Whoever you put in office is merely your tool. And a tool is always supposed to be in your direct control. You're kidding yourself if you think that there's any person you can put in an administrative position and then you don't have to watch them afterwards to make sure they're doing what you told them to do. You can't have total control by remote control. You gotta be hands-on. Again, it's not about being friends with anyone. It's about getting what's yours. Do you think the billionaires and mega millionaires who bankroll both major parties do it for free? Do you think that they didn't make sure to get those politicians to make promises to them and political concessions before they gave them one thin dime? This is what it means to be politically mature, and maturity means to be complete in one's development. To be slack is not to be complete, and to be a political codependent is neither complete nor developed. Politics is transactional, quid pro quo. Rahm Emanuel said Democrats need to stay away from politics being transactional. Now, Rahm Emanuel is a hardcore Zionist and a hardcore anti-black racist. Do you think he would ever tell his buddy Benjamin Netanyahu to stop being transactional? No, this was his response as the then mayor of Chicago to the growing political demands of the black voters. It's just like that memo that went out from DNC headquarters during the height of the BLM protests, telling Democratic politicians that whatever they do not make any political promises to these people. And then those same Democrats had the nerve to get in front of black voters as if they hadn't gotten the memo, as if they had said, oh yeah, that's right, we're not making any promises to these people, we're just going to nod our heads and pretend to be listening to them and wait until they're finished, and then it's going to be okay, vote for us and we'll be looking out for you. When a child lies to you, do you tolerate that or do you punish it? Power is not about popularity, it's about getting things done. We can no longer hold ourselves hostage to what other people say or want. The times when we got things was when we stopped caring what anybody else said and we made noise and a lot of it. When we made other people uncomfortable, that's when we became more comfortable. Whether it be the tethers or bootlicks or just plain scum like a dummy, the people opposing us all have one cowardly trait in common. Not one of them is or ever would make any demands of white power. In fact, they won't even say that we should be making any demands, period. Now every other group makes demands. And yet you don't see any of these cowardly reprobate Negroes saying that, well, these other groups, they shouldn't be making any demands either. No, the only ones they don't want making any demands is us. And they never have any demands of their own. Now that tells you everything you need to know. Reparations as a political subject makes a lot of people scared. And when people are scared, they try to hide it through one of two means. They either get very angry and try to use that as some sort of shield, or they try to hide their fear behind laughter. Anger is an emotional shield, and laughter is a coping mechanism. The Negro who tries to laugh at reparations is actually scared of what their non-black benefactors or co-workers or the non-black people that they want sexual access to will think. A number of Negroes have settled for being the good black or a bed buddy, and they can't imagine life without the total approval of non-black people. So when those of us who aren't codependents rock the boat, that makes them mad. But they can't stop us, so they either lash out with angry rhetoric like a dummy, or they try to laugh and try to convince people that they're not scared like Jason Whitlock, like he's not terrified of what those non-black folks he desperately wants money from will think of him. Because as black people rise in power, they're going to be looking at their little bootlick puppets and saying, well, hell, we didn't even want you around to begin with. The goal is not to force our enemies and detractors to confess either. That's not going to happen. But when they've been defeated, they'll be quiet. That's going to shut them up because they can't speak without delegitimizing themselves even to their own. For the longest time, the white media, including their bootlicking Negroes who work for them, said that the police would never start being convicted no matter how many black people they killed because the public loves them so much, and qualified immunity, and blah blah blah. In other words, they gave us the inevitability argument. There's no point in all of you black rabble-rousers online fighting the enemy because resistance is futile, and for a few years it looked like they might have been right. But inevitably the tide began to turn, and it kept turning. And before it was all over, the same white media that carpet bombed us with lies about how the police would never be punished, they would always get away with murder, the public was behind them 100%, and that was just inevitable, and how qualified immunity was the big problem, and that was never going to change, it was inevitable. Well, without passing a single law, the streets rose up. And the scum in these racist police departments started being convicted regularly. And the white media, seeing that the public they claimed were with the cops were against them, they shut up. They never admitted that they were wrong. And we didn't wait for that. They were shut up, and we stuck to our guns. Oh, and by the way, was A Dummy or any of these other clowns who claim that reparations is such a joke, were any of these morons actually saying anything to punish the police? Were they lifting a finger or saying a word about the police? Were they trying to make any demands on that one? Or were they sitting back and saying, well, you know, what about black on black crimes? And well, if you think about the numbers of black folks who's killed by other black folks, why is we even talking about the polices? Is that what they were saying? It's pretty straightforward to identify a coward. They never take on power. And because they're cowards, they're desperately trying to get you not to do it either, because you'll get them in trouble too. Well, as our Grandmaster teacher, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, taught us, when it comes to taking on these white supremacists, when you make your demands, you do not ever make a demand that doesn't require white power to give up some of its power. Those are the only demands worth making. And yes, they are difficult, and that's because we're dealing with an entrenched enemy. Money. That is, the distribution of resources is the biggest issue at stake because it's what white supremacy is based on. That's what powers it. It's what it was instituted to guarantee to those classified as white. As we begin to push hard for what's owed, what's ours, as Dr. King said, that's where we're going to encounter our stiffest resistance. What's called for is persistence on our part. The enemy is going to push the lie that their position is inevitable. We're going to push the truth that ours is relentless. Slavery didn't fall quickly, or even after a few years, and neither will white supremacy. But it will fall. And the same cowards who are telling us that we shouldn't be demanding reparations, these are the same fools who have no clue what the hell they're going to do in a post-white supremacy world. In a world where black empowerment stands, that means you gotta stand on your own 2 feet. And these clowns, they're used to leaning on white power. Well, I say it's time for a little political Darwinism to play itself out. It's time for the black folks who actually are serious about empowerment to join with other people where they are. How do you build a national movement? You do it right where you are locally. And that's how you put a spine in people who act like they lost theirs. When I say that black empowerment only exists because of you, I mean that literally. Black empowerment is not something that comes from the top down. It's not something that only comes from the mouthpieces of black media. It comes from you. So that's the answer for a lot of people who wonder, what is it that I can do? What is it that you can do? You find people who are right there where you live, who are of like mind, and you know that they are. Never underestimate the influence that a group of folks who are actually on code can have. At the end of the day, it's not about having the largest numbers. It's about having the most dedicated numbers. As you see more and more black people dropping out of the political process, recognize this trend for what it really is. A protest vote against the suck-ups, sellouts, and sycophants that white power has propped up and presented to us. You got more and more black folks every year giving a vote of no confidence to a political status quo that lies to them and either institutes policies to harm them or does nothing about these policies after they're put in place. More and more black people are getting to the point that they're sick and tired of being lied to, and the white media and their black bootlicks' usual bag of tricks isn't working anymore. Yes, these disaffected black people are put out with the lies from both the major parties, but they're also ready for someone to focus their anger into action. Why not you? They need to know that there's other people around who feel the exact same way that they do. Why don't you lead them to the light? And sure, the corrupt politicians, these Negroes who have been sucking on white power's teat, they're going to try to stop it. Of course they will, because you're cutting their lifeline, and they know you're not alone, and they don't have a plan B. They represent white power. You represent black people. A lot of people are only too fond of talking about grown folks' business. Well, this is the hour to show everyone that the black vote has finally grown up and that at long last, playtime is over. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Elroy Crocker, Burkett Cochrane, Gwendolyn Langston, Hildman Gallo, and Bo McLean. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.